Hello YouTube. Well, right up front you're gonna have to forgive the road noise. There's not much I can do about it. It's a pretty busy road. Anyway, I'm in Waterford, Pennsylvania, and at the site of Fort LeBeouf, and I'm about to go through their museum and really check it out. Most notable things that happened here: Washington motorcycles. Washington was here December 1753. He came here with a notice from the governor of Pennsylvania. Of Virginia, because this was still part of the Virginia colony, to tell the French that they were trespassing on British soil. The French had built Fort LeBeouf, and as part of a chain of forts between Pittsburgh and Detroit, and they to protect their interests. So let's look around a little. Now, right near here is where they built the fort. It's in the middle of town right now, but it was built in 1753 and abandoned in 1759. The British rebuilt it in 1760 and was destroyed by Native Americans in 1763. And in 1794, Pennsylvania federal soldiers built a fort, succeeded in 1797 by a U.S. Army blockhouse. This paved area is the actual site and outline of the blockhouse, and they made it into a nice little park with a statue of George Washington here, representing him delivering those letters to the French back in 1753. The French presence here, a lot came down through Canada, Hudson Bay area, through all of the Great Lakes, and sending out people to trade with the natives. And of course, along the shores of Lake Erie, we're not that far away from where we are right now. There was a big difference in how the French dealt with the natives and the English dealt with the natives. The French respected the natives' rights to land, but they did come in to trade basically for furs, and they introduced guns, steel, and other manufactured goods, which changed the way the tribes survived. A lot of the old ways went by the wayside when you had guns to hunt with instead of bow and arrow, so on. But the British, on the other hand, came for territory. And the French used that to stir up the tribes and go against the British during the French and Indian War. Now, the French and Indian War was the North American component of the 7 Years' War, which was going on in Europe. And at first, the French were doing very well. And some of the things that the French would trade would be spear points and bucket hooks. Now, even buckets, if you think about it, if you're using clay pots that crack, get broken, a metal bucket would be a vast improvement. And one thing that the natives really liked were the striker here, the flint. Okay, at the beginning is a striker, then the flint, then char cloth. And they were so much easier to get fires started that way that the natives really would trade almost anything to get their hands on one of those. Now, the Iroquois were the only ones who didn't side with the French at first. They tended to try to stay neutral and play both sides against each other. Eventually they got sick of the British breaking any agreements, and in June 18th, 1763, a band of about 3 dozen Indians attacked the fort here, And over the course of all day, they harassed the fort, and fire arrows. The fort caught fire 3 times. Each time they were put out, and the roof caught fire. And the men here were poorly provisioned. They had very little powder, and it was poor quality. And they dug a lot of the lead out of trees that they'd use for target practice. Anyway, when the fort they were going to give it up, they escaped out a back window and headed south to the next fort, which was Fort Venago. Sorry, I had to read it. Because the Indians had come from the north, they thought that the next fort north had been destroyed. Turns out Venago was destroyed, and they had to go all the way to Fort Pitt on the site of today's Pittsburgh, which is over 100 miles away. There was very few safe places for an Englishman at that time out here. A couple doors down from the historic fort museum is the Judson House, and it was built around 1810. And what's interesting is that you sort of expect, what with the connection to Washington, there's all kinds of things, but there's a plate that he used in Valley Forge, and there's all kinds of different commemorative things. I like this map from the 1780s. So this is a model of the fort that was done in the 30s at CCC. So off of the living room is the nice big dining room, and there's a pass-through that looks like it goes through. We'll see what that is in a second. But it's a nice little tin oven. A nice modern kitchen for the time with running water, tin sink, place to bathe your baby. And that pass-through was right out of the kitchen, so they could keep the door closed and pass the food through as it was cooked without heating up the dining room. So this is only the second one of these I've ever seen, and this one, I think you may have seen it in my Genesee Country Museum one, but this one's a much better example, and we can really get in to look at it. This is a wreath made from human hair. And you've got a butterfly, a little flower basket, and the actual wreath. But let me get in real close, and you can actually see it's all human hair. Although there are probably some wires buried in there to hold the flowers up. But to get an overview. A lot of times they did these from hair of the deceased family members. Sometimes when you brush your hair, you collect the hair that came off in the brush and use that for doing these kind of things. And what do you do before the internet? So we're in what's referred to as the Lincoln bedroom. Why? Nobody's really sure. Lincoln never stayed here. He did have one of his officials came from the town. There's a story that he was going to be coming here to dedicate that statue of Washington we saw in the beginning, before when he was assassinated and couldn't make it. So who knows? But this room's got a lot of things sort of about Lincoln and Mary Todd. That's what the White House looked like at the time. back when anybody could just walk in. I've seen bed warmers where you put the coals in and run them around, but that's the first ceramic one. Obviously, pull the top up, fill it with hot water, stick it in, warm the covers up before you climb in. It's sort of nice. So one of the interesting features of this house is that door. Is when they added on that section of the house, and I don't know if you can see through the doorway, see how low the roof line is. They basically cut a small doorway from this section to that section. That's Mr. Judson who built this place, and I think I'm gonna say goodbye to him and get back on the road and see what else I can find. See you later, YouTube.